Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Season 1 of Warzone right now is pretty insane, to say the least. We obviously have the brand new Caldera map, so that's a whole new experience in and of itself. And we also have the whole meta discussion. We've seen several pretty severe changes to the Cold War meta, or the previous Warzone meta, I should say, between a lot of the main weapons there. And obviously, we also have the 40 new weapons of Vanguard all in the mix as well. And today, we got a lot to talk about when it comes to the Season 1 meta. Which weapons are currently top meta weapons, which weapons are just competitive, which weapons are viable or garbage, so on and so forth. So today, as we go over the entire Season 1 meta, if you enjoy the video at any point, or if you find it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it. Would be seriously appreciated. And of course, if you're new to the channel, or if you have not already subscribed, just about 58% of viewers watching are not subscribed to the channel yet. So if you want to stay up to date with everything going on in COD, this is the best place to be. So feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. So if you're pretty active on the channel, this is a familiar list to you. This is our list of every single weapon in Warzone ranked in terms of their overall competitiveness in the general meta. We've got top meta slash competitive, which is the best of the best. We've got competitive, which is generally very, very good. Viable, which means, you know, they're solid, you could use them, but there are quite a few better choices. Below average, would not really ever recommend using these. Niche, which is just they're semi-decent, but only for very specific things. And then garbage, you don't want to be using these. And this is where the meta stands pre the Season 1 update. This is all the old metas. Now, obviously, a lot of this has changed. And first and foremost, before we go down and get into all these Vanguard weapons, I did want to go through and readjust what we got going on here, because honestly, as it stands, this is not that accurate anymore. I mean, the Kar 98K and the Swiss both got severely nerfed. And I mean, definitely the Swiss, this thing absolutely is dropping down to competitive at best. They destroyed the flinch on this thing. They gave it an extra damage range, like all around. The Swiss is not looking all that great. The Kar 98K from Modern Warfare, I feel like, despite the major flinch nerf, I feel like could still maybe be top meta. At the moment that I'm recording this, Focus actually completely negates that flinch nerf. I imagine that'll be patched, but even if you get the first shot off with the car, it could still be very, very good. It's just the flinch problem now that it has that sort of sets it apart. But I do think that could still arguably be a top meta weapon. For what it's worth, the Cold War AK did see several nerfs and some different changes, as did the EM2. And I think the EM2 definitely stays in competitive when it comes down to it. It was like ridiculously good, right? It had insane TTK, insane range. They did end up nerfing it a little bit. Now it's a much more high skill gap weapon, so I feel like competitive is the best place for that. But because of all these other indirect nerfs that we've seen with other weapons, there are some weapons that were untouched that seemingly become better because they're now a lot more viable. For instance, the XM4, I think, is probably one of the new best rifles, if not the best ranged rifle in the game. So for the time being, I think XM4 is probably going to jump up to top meta. I also think some other weapons in here, like the C58, for instance, down here, it's in competitive still. It's now extremely competitive, borderline top meta, because of some of the other nerfs that weapons like the EM2 and the AK got. The AK is definitely borderline top meta right now. I still think it's one of the better options, but if it gets nerfed anymore, it's definitely going to drop down closer to competitive. The MP5s still in competitive despite their nerfs, but they're definitely more in line with, you know, the Bullfrog. The Mac 10 especially, I feel like, is now a great option. The CX9, the Lapa especially, has one of the best TTKs in the entire SMG category. So all these weapons now inherently become a whole lot better because of all the nerfs that took place to other weapons. These ones become better. So that's sort of how I see this meta standing right now. But then we got to also factor in the 40 weapons here. So we got to rank a lot of stuff when it comes down to it. So, you know, grab some snacks, get a drink if you need to, maybe some G Fuel with code Immortal, and let's get into it. So first up, the Thompson, the M1928. I mean, I think honestly, this is a lower tier competitive SMG just because it has a strange TTK. Its mobility is not as good as some of the other subs that we have, but it can be solid. It's got the damage increasing rounds. Like if you're a very accurate player and can consistently hit those chest, neck, and headshots, this can be a decent sub, but I do think there are some better options. This, I would say, is probably borderline viable and competitive. We'll see how some of the other ones stand, though, as time goes on. Also, let's filter it in here with some of the other SMGs, so it's a little bit more organized. The Owen gun. This one, to me, I would say is top meta right now. This is one of the best SMGs in the game. They did make some changes to it with the last weapon tuning update. They buffed some of the multipliers, they nerfed some of the multipliers, but honestly, when it comes down to it, this thing's TTK is unreal. It's really good for close and medium range fights. It's got like definitely that sniper support potential for sure, but even without that, just as a basic secondary, the thing fries. So absolutely top meta in my opinion as it stands. The Type 100 is also very, very good. It's definitely borderline top meta and competitive here for sure. I don't know if I want to put it up there with the Owen gun because between using the two, I'm a little bit more confident with the Owen gun in my hands. but this thing is definitely one of the best SMGs in the game right now, especially from Vanguard. I would say it's probably a top 3 Vanguard sub. They ended up buffing this with the last weapon tuning update, making it even better. So great TTK, really good mobility, I would say, as well. So definitely one of the better options, better than the M1928 in my opinion. So we're gonna have to see if this one ends up dropping down at all over the course of time. The PPSH from Vanguard saw several nerfs. I still think it is a competitive sub when it comes down to it, but pre this last weapon tuning update, it was absolutely top meta. It was the best Vanguard gun in the game. They did some pretty severe changes though to it. The neck multiplier was murdered. They just brought that down so much. The medium range damage range was also decreased quite a bit. So definitely gonna have more drop offs and be a little bit less lethal than before, but I still think it is a pretty solid close range option. Also has really good DPM potential with that larger magazine, so it's definitely pretty solid still. We get to some of the shotguns here intermittently. Not gonna lie, the shotguns feel pretty strong except for a couple of them, so we're gonna go a little bit out of order here. First up, when it comes to the double barrel, I don't think this one is anything special. You just don't have enough ammo to fully be able to compete. Even with a Kimbo, I don't feel like it's really worth running all that much. So it's a viable shotgun. You could get away with it, especially with a Kimbo, but it's by no means something you're gonna see on a lot of pro loadouts. The Graciato, I would say, is borderline viable and competitive, so we'll just drop that one in viable for the time being. It's spammy. It can be like a 2-shot, 3-shot kill depending on the range and the health of the enemy, but again, I just feel like it doesn't have the full potential. The combat shotgun, though, absolutely is competitive. This thing can one-shot through 3 plates of armor if you're within a certain range and you get certain body shots, right? So this thing is absolutely insane for a shotgun, definitely competitive. And then the revolving, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't experienced this a ton in game. It seems like it's pretty solid. If anything, I would say it's borderline competitive and viable, but when it comes down to it, I'm taking the combat shotgun over the revolving every single day of the week, so I don't feel like those need to be in the same category per se. We'll just drop the other 3 in viable, and the combat shotgun is definitely far and above the best of the batch. The MG42 is an interesting one because it definitely packs a punch. It's got power for sure, but it also has pretty bad recoil, especially over range. It's not the most convenient of weapons to be using. I'm torn between competitive and viable because that damage is so strong. I think that when it comes to LMGs, there are some better options. So I feel like for now, I'm going to drop the MG42 into viable. It is a solid weapon, but it definitely has that higher skill gap and skill barrier that sort of hinders semi-decent players from wanting to use that versus something that's a lot more beamy, like for instance the Finn, the MG82, the Brew, and the PKM. Those are definitely some better options when it comes down to it. The DP27 is one of those LMGs that I feel like is pretty solid. It has some awkward bounce to it, but at the same time, it is also very strong and can and will fry enemies once you're able to land those shots. So you build a setup that's based around control and you're gonna have a good time. You mount with this thing, you're gonna have a good time. I feel like it is one of the better LMGs that we have for sure. STG is up next. This one is absolutely competitive. It is just a very standard basic rifle that does the job, right? Like, I mean, low recoil, pretty good range, very good TTK. It's got vital as an option. So like all around, you can't go wrong with the STG. It is the same deal as the M4, the AK. It's that icon weapon from the game. Naturally, it's going to be very good. The Type 11 as an LMG, I feel like also is just viable. It doesn't really hit all that hard. It's all right, but it's nothing to write home about. There's really not much else you got to say about that. And the Bren, honestly, I'm not going to lie, it is competitive, surprisingly enough, despite the incredibly slow fire rate and the much more noticeable recoil versus some other weapons. You build this thing out correctly and it hits like a truck. You get no damage fall off with the one barrel and you get the BMG rounds and you're just going to fry everyone and everything. Definitely is competitive, higher skill gap competitive, but high risk, high reward in this case. Definitely a very strong weapon. We get to some of the tac rifles here. Not gonna lie, I have not been impressed with any of the attack rifles so far. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that the M1 Grand, the SVT, especially because if you want like the good damage, it's a slow fire rate. And even the G43, despite having some decent potential with that uncapped fire rate, they're all just viable as it stands right now. I think out of any of these, the G43 has the most potential to jump up to competitive and to top tier meta. But just from what I've used of it so far, while it does kill very fast if you have a good trigger finger, it's just like the FAL in the sense of it is a very, very high skill gap weapon, and casual players that can't spam it are not going to find success with it. And meta weapons are weapons that anybody can use and do very well with, and that is exactly what we got going on here, and that's exactly what the G43 is not. The Type 99 for snipers, I would say, is probably the most mediocre sniper out of the bunch when it comes down to it. So I'm probably going to drop this one into viable as well. I mean, it's going up against the CAR and the 3-line, which are both very good rifles. I believe those are up next. They are. The 3-line is definitely a competitive sniper, I would say, in the current meta. However, the CAR, I would say, is top meta when it comes down to it. I mean, the thing has insane velocity. You put lengthened on there. You put the, better barrel for the larger damage radius or damage, hitbox there. It is a very good sniper. Definitely what I've been using the most for sniping in the game so far. Obviously, we got 2 CARs in top meta. I don't think it'll stay that way for very long. I could definitely see them nerfing the CAR 98K from Modern Warfare a little bit more and bringing the Vanguard CAR as that main sniper because obviously they want to push the new titles weapons. So the Vanguard CAR absolutely, I think, is the best of the bunch when it comes to those. The combat shield going in the same place as the other Riot shields, just in niche there. No real reason to be running this unless you're trying to goof around or you want some extra protection. So it's not really used for anything that crazy. We got the Rat pistol here. Honestly, I would say that this just has to be viable, right? I mean, it has no fire rate cap, so you can spam this thing, but it's just a pistol at the end of the day. It's really nothing too crazy. Some other pistols, though, a little bit better. The Automaton, I would say this one is top meta right now as well when it comes down to it. I mean, it is great for all engagements. It's very similar to the Cold War AK in the sense that if you want to use it as sniper support and up close, you can do that. You can build it out to be a lot more aggressive, but if you want to use it as a main primary and use it for medium and long range fights, you can do that as well, and it's still going to be very, very good. So the Automaton is one of the best rifles in the game, especially from Vanguard. We get the top break here. It's competitive. I don't want to say it is fully top meta yet because you have to run this as a Kimbo and basically make it the snake shots, but you only have about 8 to 12 meters of range before they're completely obsolete, and there's just not enough versatility there for it to be top meta, but they're definitely very, very good as it stands right now. I mean, the thing's just absolutely smoking. While we're at it, let's talk about the machine pistol. Let's add these to the same competitive area. Akimbo machine pistols, 40-round mag. You can just spray and pray, and they will erase players. Absolutely worth trying both of these Akimbo pistols out if you're looking for a restock or a ghost or a tempered class right off the rip. Those are great secondaries to be using. Back when it comes to the other pistols, the 1911, I'm just going to go ahead and put this one in viable as well. Really nothing too crazy, decent TTK, but it's just a pistol at the end of the day. Then the Clouser, while it does have really good damage, I'm going to say is below average. It's just the fire rate, the visual kick, and the recoil there is just not ideal at all. Not really worth running in my opinion. Then we get the launchers. I mean, these are all going to be niche launchers. They're not going to do anything special for you in game. There's no real reason to run these unless you're just trying to, get some camos or something maybe, or try and destroy some vehicles, whatever the case may be. Not practical to be using for anything realistically. Same deal with the knife. Let's go in a niche with the other one. Then we get to the remainder of the rifles. The Cooper Carbine, surprisingly, in my opinion, is very, very good. I'm gonna go ahead and drop this one in competitive. It's got a little bit of visual kick, but overall this thing is very versatile once you build it out. It can be used for some of those medium range fights, almost as sniper support if you wanted to, but also at range it can be very powerful and very good as well if you're able to land your shots. So Cooper Carbine is surprisingly good in my opinion. The Itra Burst, I feel like, is more so viable than anything else. Like, it does have a decent TTK, but also I don't feel like it's anything that special. Just the builds with it are not that ideal when it comes down to it, especially for ranged fights and with the blue mechanic that's in there as it stands. The Itra just is not going to be able to succeed against some of these fully auto weapons, so nothing too crazy with that one. The PTRS here, while it does pack a punch, I mean, the thing is just so slow. You can't do anything with it. You can't run around with it. You can hardly ADS with it without getting just smoked. So it's viable at best. It's honestly pushing niche, I would say, more so than anything, but I don't want to, destroy it too fast, too early on. So we'll leave it in viable for now, but it's borderline dropping down. Let me just say that to being a not so useful weapon. Back to the rifles though, to round things out, we've got the Bar. This one is definitely competitive as well. I mean, it is one of those slow firing, heavy hitting weapons that surprisingly has very low recoil, but great range. It's like a 4-shot kill in most engagements. Definitely worthy of being a competitive weapon. The AS-44, it is very good for close range fights. Not so much for range though. Like, this thing does not really have much range at all. I feel like viable is the best place to put this in the overall meta. It will fry up close as a SMG AR hybrid because of that fire rate, but outside of that, it's just too much work to do well with it over range. Not worth being in competitive or top meta for sure. The NZ41, I feel like, is going to be one of the better sniper support rifles in the game. At first, before they, nerfed the neck multiplier and the recoil on it, it was definitely a solid long range weapon, but now it really thrives in those close and medium range fights where you can easily land shots because it does have a really good TTK and a really good damage output. Obviously, though, over range now, it's going to be a lot harder to use and not super ideal for those fights. The Volk, as much as I want it to be competitive, just does not seem like it has the go-to damage or recoil properties yet. If they were to up it a little bit, I think it would be really, really good and definitely a competitive weapon. However, it is pretty much just limited to being a close range rifle for sniper support, or for being that one-off random close range fight you use it for. It's definitely not something that is nearly as versatile as the Automaton, even the Owen gun, you know, the other rifles that we got up here between the Cooper Carbine, the NZ, the STG. It's just not fully up there yet. We could see some changes to that though in the future. Then our last two weapons, the MP40 and the Sten. The MP40 is absolutely top meta right now after we saw some of the other changes go into nerfing the PPSH and changing some of the other subs. MP40 is easily one of the best choices in the game, especially as it stands right now when I'm recording this video. There's the broken blueprint that's got Vital on it. That makes things very, very good. Then finally, the Sten. For whatever reason, they nerfed this, even though it was already very average. I'm not sure why they did that, but they did that. And now because of that, I feel like this is definitely just a viable weapon, not really all that great. It has some decent damage here and there, but when it comes to competing against the other SMGs, it just doesn't have what it takes, right? So as it stands right now, I'd be paying attention to this top meta category and the competitive category when it comes to building your loadouts. We got a lot of options right now, and really, I think this is only going to grow bigger over the course of time with more viable weapons making their way into the mix. But that said, that is effectively the Season 1 meta as it stands. As we see new weapon tuning go into place, we'll be updating this list over time, so stay tuned for that. Stick it here for everything else going on in COD as well. Make sure you are subscribed with your notifications turned on. And if you enjoyed this video, let me know by dropping a like on it. Would be seriously appreciated. Does really help the channel grow. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.